So Fast and Furious is a franchise that's gone from street racing and tuna sandwiches to fighting tanks and going to space. And regardless of what you may think about the current state of the films, you can't deny how ridiculously successful they are. To date, the franchise has grossed over $6 billion, and of course, with this level of success comes terrible licensed video games. Now, this isn't the first Fast and Furious game. I mean, there's actually been a fair few of them. However, from what I've seen, Crossroads is almost certainly one of the worst, if not the worst. Receiving a 35% on Metacritic, 1 out of 5 on Eurogamer, and IGN gave it a generous 4 out of 10, saying, "Short, shallow and surprisingly simple, Fast and Furious Crossroads is a disappointment in almost every department." So yeah, promising stuff. Anyway, this game was released back in 2020, but was announced by Vin Diesel and Michelle Rodriguez at the 2019 Game Awards, promising high-speed heists, cinematic non-stop action, and adrenaline-fueled stunts in exotic locations. Yet, needless to say, it didn't deliver on any of those things. Fun fact, its all-time peak players is 54 people. And before I start, I'd like to mention, this game is not only bad, it's also a borderline scam. No joke, it costs £40, or £52 if you count the DLC, and that's more than Elden Ring. But the difference is, you can beat this in 5 hours. Oh, and the cutscenes take up 1, so it's only 4 hours of actual gameplay. Anyway, without further ado, let's see how bad this game really is. So this game's story is suitably ridiculous. Basically, you have to take down a smuggling gang and then a terrorist organisation run by a guy called Ormstrad. A guy who wants to strap a doomsday device to a rocket, launch it into space, and when it reaches the upper atmosphere, it'll shut down America's defence grid, in turn leaving it vulnerable to all kinds of attacks. And of course, this is all done by 2 people who fucking fix cars for a living, so it makes complete sense. Now, I could sit here and complain about the plot, but considering they literally went to space in a fucking Pontiac Fiero in the latest movie, it really isn't surprising. However, what is surprising is how fucking dull this game is. Say what you want about the movies, but one thing they aren't is boring. And this by comparison is like watching paint dry. Firstly, it doesn't even follow Dom and Letty. Don't get me wrong, they are there, but the main focus is on 3 new characters. Vienna, or V, Cam and Sebastian. Now, I don't have an issue with this sort of thing if the new characters are engaging and interesting, but they're not. Of course they're not, what did you expect? The game tries so hard to make you care about these people. I mean, the first 30 minutes of this 4-hour game is dedicated to them. But surprise fucking surprise, 30 minutes of backstory isn't comparable to over 20 years. Each of them have the most basic character traits. For example, Cam's the tech wizard, V's haunted by her past, and Sebastian's, I don't know, dead. I should also add they can actually be quite unlikable at times, especially Vienna when she's willing to sacrifice millions of people to get revenge on one guy. I mean, it doesn't even get much better when Dom and Letty come along, because Vin Diesel and Michelle Rodriguez sound like they couldn't give a single fuck about what's going on. I actually read a YouTube comment saying he sounds like he delivered his lines while lying in bed, which is honestly pretty accurate.
No way, look at that thing. That can't be street legal.
Wow, this fugitive didn't come to play.
The only person who gives an emotional voice performance is V when she's screaming about how the bad guy's son killed Sebastian.
I'm not letting Kai escape!
He is not getting away a second time.
What? No! Kai is mine!
Then again, since you don't care, it just comes off as if she's getting incredibly worked up over the fact it's going to lightly rain on Wednesday. Another reason this story is so boring is because, well, it's canon, taking place during the Hobbs and Shaw spin-off film. Now, making a game canon isn't necessarily a bad thing, however what they've done here is make the entire story have as much impact as a wet noodle. See, you know going into this, nothing is going to happen to Dom, Letty or Roman, and the only people who are in any danger are the people you don't care about. Even when one of them fucking dies, all you can focus on is how the character models can't show any emotion or why their lip sync is seemingly never on time.
We're not equipped to fix these things.
Let me pop the hood and show you the beauty of these things.
Okay. Hitch it up.
Yeah?
And let's take it over to Sebastian's.
It's also just full of plot holes and things that don't make sense. Now, there are too many to list all of them, but here are the ones I felt were worth mentioning. Number 1, there's a level where V and Cam go undercover in a highly dangerous terrorist base, and Letty says they'll be given fake identification to pass security.
Interpol will set you up with fake backgrounds strong enough to pass security.
But for some reason, they keep her name as Vienna. Granted, they are only there for one level, but if I was going undercover with terrorists, the last name I'd want would be my own name. Number 2, Roman explains that the villain's plan involves a space rocket, so they go to find it, only to end up at a warehouse.
This isn't a launch site.
Like, how did you not realise this wasn't a launch site before you arrived? I mean, the one we see it take off from is literally visible from miles away. And finally, number 3, and my personal favourite, there's a scene where Dom's explaining who Ormstrad is.
He used to run rackets all over Europe back in the 60s.
And finally, the pacing is just garbage. I mean, take a look at this cutscene.
If we're gonna rob the Tadako, we're gonna need some rides that can't be traced.
No joke, they even have the gall to establish and resolve a storyline in the very last scene of the game.
I organized a street race, and people died.
There's something about that race you don't know.
What do you mean?
It was a gang hit, made to look like an accident.
We got evidence that the engines in that race were tampered with. This should clear your name.
So the gameplay is much like the story, terrible. Essentially every mission boils down to drive around, complete an over-the-top objective, take out the enemies by ramming them or using gadgets, and from time to time fight a boss. Well, unless you're driving around at the speed limit talking about what you're going to get for dinner.
Okay, we'll eat out. But at that Catalan place we went for my birthday.
Now, Crossroads has all the obvious problems when it comes to terrible racing games. For instance, just one POV, which is far too close, and horrendous car handling that means you can't go around a corner without careening into the nearest wall. Although what's actually quite concerning here is that we aren't talking Team 6 Studios. No, we're talking the same people who made Project Cars and Need for Speed Shift. I mean, they made one of the best racing games of 2009, so I really can't explain what's happened. Although, this game does have one thing in common with Need for Speed, that being that it feels like it was developed 11 years ago and they simply forgot to publish it. Because this is an Xbox 360 game with a shiny coat of paint, masquerading as a new-gen product. A coat of paint that, might I add, looks like arse. It honestly ranges from somewhat passable to downright horrid, with the character models being the worst example. Makes me wonder why this game takes up such an egregious amount of space on my PC. Like, this actually takes up more space than fucking Elden Ring, and I'm 90 hours into that game. How is that possible? And it's not just the graphics that make this game feel dated. No, the entire thing feels dated. This is something where if I took it into Blockbuster, they'd offer me £2.50 in in-store credit for it. We're talking invisible walls everywhere, driving into 2 feet of water resets your position, boring linear missions, lifeless environments, and terrible AI that will crash into walls or slow down mid-mission, forcing you to wait until they catch up. Also, as you may have noticed by now, this game doesn't have a speedometer. Even racing games from the fucking 1980s had speedometers. However, the most offensive thing about the gameplay is it's boring, and not a bit boring. This is daytime shopping channel levels of dull. And this, in my opinion, is for 2 key reasons. Number 1 is the severe lack of any challenge. And before you ask, no, there are no difficulty settings. Let me repeat that. This game came out in 2020 and there are no difficulty settings. Anyway, the main reason it's so easy is because they've given the cars a simply gargantuan amount of health, to the point where you might as well be as invincible as Dom himself. And unless what's attacking you is the fire from a rocket engine, it won't be a threat. Fun fact, they have so much health that unless it's a boss, you can do this whole game without killing a single enemy. And, as if to add insult to injury, even if you do die, there are so many checkpoints it's literally impossible to lose progress. So this paired with the already lifeless story means you have a game where you have literally no reason to care about a single thing that happens, and it makes 4 hours feel like 40. Now the second reason it's so boring is a bit more interesting, because Crossroads can't decide if it wants to be a video game or Fast and Furious the interactive movie, as not only is 1/5 of it cutscenes, but the rest is an endless stream of scripted scenarios and QuickTime events where you have little to no control. For example, every police chase goes like this. You'll be driving along, and when you reach a certain point, they'll instantly lose you, no matter how slow you're going, and despite the fact you're in full view of everybody, they'll just stop chasing you. You can even go back in their direction and hang out for an hour and a half, and they won't start chasing you again. Other examples include AIs getting a sudden burst of godlike speed at the end of a race, and characters carrying on with dialogue when what they're talking about isn't happening.
Your reputation is every bit deserved, Miss Cole. But this isn't over yet. Your boyfriend isn't up to your same high standard.
Bro, I've spent the entire race in last place. What are you talking about? This whole game is just things happening regardless of how well you play. The best way I can think to describe this is you're a taxi driver with Vin Diesel in the back, taking him to where he wants to go. So you are there, but he's having all the fun. And finally, I'd like to say that this game is not only terrible and overpriced, it's also broken. I saw brake lights flashing on and off, the camera clipping through rocks, and audio being cut off.
I ain't getting turned. This is like one long bowling alley knocking pins down. I ain't getting turned into a pancake.
Also, every single cutscene seems to have an issue, whether it be bad lip sync, out of time muzzle flashes, people grabbing thin air, or visual glitches. There is always something wrong. So believe it or not, this game actually has multiplayer, which I didn't get to play because there was literally no one online. I tried for 20 minutes and I wasn't able to find a single game. Hardly surprising though, when this game's peak players was 54 people, so I really should have seen it coming, although from what I saw on YouTube it looks just as bad as the actual game. I mean, the customization was okay, I suppose, kinda limited for a full price AAA game, but you know, functional. Then again, if I'm paying £40 for a game, I want a bit more than functional. So surprisingly, there was one feature I liked in this game, and that's that you can change drivers on the fly. See, each car has a different gadget, and you'll have to change depending on the situation. And honestly, I think it's a neat idea, horribly executed, but it's not a bad idea. And that's it. So Fast and Furious Crossroads is a mess, and the fact they're still charging £40 for this shit should be illegal. And as mentioned, that's just for the base game. If you want the DLC, then it's going to cost you more than a newly released AAA title. Maybe, just maybe, if this cost £10 I'd be a bit less harsh, but even so, it's buggy, flawed, incredibly boring, and worst of all, 4 hours long with no replay value, because everything you do is scripted and you have no way of changing your approach to the game. This is the worst game I've played so far. Sure, it's not as glitchy as Drake or as repetitive as Pimp My Ride, but the fact you can have any other game in existence for the same price irks me. It's by far the worst value for money, and for that reason it's the worst game on this list. Until it goes on sale in the summer, then it's right under Drake, but until then it's the worst. Anyway, if you enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.